The Kaw people are one of the original Aboriginal tribes of Kansas. In fact, the state of Kansas is named after the Kaw people. Our traditional name is Konse, and that comes from a root word akka, which means south wind. And so the Kaw people are the people of the south winds. The Konse people, we had villages all along what we now call the Kansas River or the Kaw River, especially between Lawrence and Topeka. We had villages all along there, all the way out to Manhattan, Kansas. And we were removed from those village sites and then brought into this area now in Council Grove, a much smaller reservation. But along that river, that watershed, there was a rock, a very unusual rock, made out of Siouan quartzite. And it probably came down on a glacier 500,000 years ago. There isn't any other kind of geology in that area that's similar to this rock. So it would have stood out on the plains, and the red color, the red quartzite color of this rock against the green of the prairie really would have stood out. And this was no ordinary rock. It wasn't a small rock. This rock was 28 tons and 11 feet tall. So it would have been this red monolith along the Kansas River. So I'm sure our people would have been attracted to it along with other tribes. And the fact that it was near the confluence of the Kansas River and a creek called Shunganunge Creek, another kind of waterway that meanders all the way up into Topeka. It was at a kind of a critical geographical point, reference point. So I think it was a wayfinding marker for people traveling those watersheds. But it also was a place of gathering for my people. We had many of our ceremonies there. The rock had several dozen songs associated with it because the rock really was a symbol of the Creator. It was strong, it was resilient, it was timeless. It was really kind of indestructible, and those are the qualities that the Creator has. And so we would gather not to worship the rock. We weren't rock worshipers, but we gathered at the stone as like a church or an altar to honor the Creator as the rock kind of being that symbol. And it actually, a lot of us believe that, our tribe believed that rock was kind of a conduit between the spirit world and our world. We believe we had spirit villages all along that watershed, and so the stone, what we call Injuje Wahobe, and that literally means sacred red rock in our language. So it was something that was very, very important to us as a cultural item.
For the Kaw Nation, the rock itself is not just a symbol in the abstract, it's part of the Kaw culture and the Kaw spirituality.
So we were removed from that area into what we now call, or what is now Council Grove, and settlers started moving in to our old reservation. And so there was a mystique about this Indian artifact, that's on the river. And so I think people started to covet the stone. The local people started to covet the stone. And there was a competition between Topeka and Lawrence to see who could acquire the stone. The folks in Topeka wanted to take the stone and put it at the Capitol building as a symbol of white settlement there. And the people of Lawrence wanted to acquire the stone and put it in City Hall as a commemoration of the 75th anniversary of Lawrence. This is in 1929. So the descendants of the abolitionists that came from New England that settled the area wanted to honor their ancestors that settled that. And the abolitionists, as you know, came here looking for freedom. They were against slavery. The irony of all of this is that the abolitionists came here for their freedom and took our freedom away from us by moving us out. And Lawrence got there before the folks from Topeka did, and able to drag the stone out of the river. I think they had a mule train that pulled it out from the river, and the railroad had just recently come through that area, and they're able to get a crane, a small crane, and get it onto a rail car, and then they brought it into Lawrence. And so again, this was the site. I can't remember how many miles it was from Lawrence, but it was basically in between Lawrence and Kansas on the Kansas River, so 20, 30 miles from Lawrence, something like that. They brought the stone in and placed it next to City Hall in a park they named after Robinson, who was one of the founders of Lawrence and one of the first superintendents of Haskell Indian Nations school. And so not only did they take the rock and put it in this park, and in a park named after a white settler who was a speculator on indigenous lands, but they put this giant 300-pound bronze plaque onto the stone and dedicated it to the hardship of the abolitionists who came from New England that settled that area. And I think what they meant by hardships was that the indigenous problem that was in that area. So really a slap in the face to my people and other indigenous peoples that they took something so sacred, so important to us, appropriated it, erased the history of it, and put a plaque on it to commemorate their own settlement and ambitions in that area. So that rock was there for nearly 100 years in Robinson Park, and I first visited the park in my 20s. I'm nearly 60 years old now. I was there in my 20s with my great uncle, and we visited the stone, and he told me the story of the stone, and that was something that was really important to our people. It's part of our history, and at that moment I said, this needs to come back to us. It shouldn't be here. It shouldn't, this is a terrible thing that had happened. And so we made an inquiry with the city council there in Lawrence about having the stone returned to us. We didn't get very far. For the next 3 decades, every once in a while we bring this up with the city commission there in Lawrence, and I was vice chairman of the Kaw Nation in 2020, 2021, and I actually wrote a letter requesting the stone be returned to the Kaw people, and it started getting a little bit more traction. There was a grassroots effort in Lawrence with white citizens or non-native citizens there that understood what had happened and wanted to help the Kaw Nation for the return of the stone. So there was this movement that started to happen in Lawrence, and some of the Kaw tribal members joined this movement, including myself, to petition the city to return the stone to the Kaw people. So it really took the community in Lawrence and the tribe working together to have the stone returned to the Kaw Nation, and in the spirit of reconciliation. A few things happened during that time. The George Floyd incident happened, and I think people started becoming more aware, more cognizant of what some of these monuments meant in town, specifically Civil War monuments in the South. But people started looking at other monuments and why they were recreated, who created them, and what the meaning was or significance was behind that. And so the stone in Juje Wahobeh kind of got on the radar with folks, and also once it kind of made the papers, it got the attention of the Mellon Foundation, and the Mellon Foundation had set aside some grant money to help communities reconcile these things that had happened with these Confederate monuments, but they saw what we were trying to do in Lawrence, having the stone returned to the Kaw Nation, working with the community, and so they provided some grant money, some support for us to work towards getting the stone returned. And then in, I think, early 2022, the City Council voted unanimously there in Lawrence to return the stone to the Kaw Nation. Back in the early 2000s, we had purchased some of our old reservation land here in Council Grove and established a tribal park. And we thought, well, since we can't really be good caretakers of the stone in Lawrence, that we would bring the stone to our tribal lands, our old reservation lands, which is now a tribal park here where we could be stewards of it here. So we had the stone moved from Lawrence in 2023 and brought here to Council Grove, and in 2024 we placed the stone in the park in its current position and had a ceremony for the stone.
When something sacred is returned to a Native nation, it's not just about the object itself, it's about restoration. Restoration of a culture, restoration of spirituality, and restoration of identity.
A lot of the tribal members had mixed feelings about the plaque and what to do with the plaque, and some of us wanted to melt it down and destroy it, but we decided, the plaque, just as the stone is important in our history, our Kansas history, that plaque was important to the descendants of the settlers that settled that area. So we had an agreement to loan it to the local museum there, the Watkins Museum, and it's on display there now as part of the history of the white settlement there. So these were the holes where the pegs were that held the plaque onto the stone, and we did fill these in because if water gets in there and it freezes, it'll expand and contract and could split the stone. So we plugged those up. But you see, we took the mortar off that held the plaque on, and we just left the bare stone here where the plaque used to be. It's important to us that we reclaim the things that are important to us, reclaim the things that make us who we are, reclaim our history, reclaim our cultural patrimony, reclaim our sacred items. And this is something that's very, very important to us. And so I look at this as a way of us really taking responsibility now and exercising our sovereignty as a distinct indigenous tribal nation to reclaim and control and manage and be good stewards of the things that make us who we are. So in that regard, I feel a great responsibility to the stone now because it's within our care, it's on our land, it's within our stewardship, and we'll do everything we can to care for the stone. And our belief is if we care for the stone, it's going to care for us.
Equally important, this gesture just creates a path forward. It builds trust and it fosters healing, and it models for communities what it looks like to move from a path of appropriation to a future that is grounded in mutual respect.
It's up to us now to let people know who we are, to help work with the school districts to develop curriculum to not just teach the white settler history of this area, but also teach the indigenous history. This land that we're standing on right now, the history of this land didn't start in the early 1800s with the arrival of settlers. The history here goes back thousands of years. There's the thousands of years of human history in this very spot. And so we're part of that human history of this land, and people should know and understand the history of the land that they live on.